Welcome to this Executive Explainer. Today, we're stepping right into the boardroom to completely evaluate our enterprise risk profile. But we aren't going to do it using the same tired traditional corporate playbooks. Instead, we're looking through the highly effective, albeit totally radical, frameworks of independent threat intelligence analyst Alberto Daniel Hill. So, get ready to challenge absolutely everything you think you know about incident response.
Before we even start talking about external threat actors, I need you to ask yourselves a pretty uncomfortable question. Is the standard corporate playbook of hiding breaches behind non-disclosure agreements actually creating catastrophic exposure for your enterprise? We always like to think our legal compliance is shielding us, but as we're about to see through Hill's data-driven analysis, that very instinct to stay quiet might literally be the biggest risk you carry.
Here is our agenda for today's briefing. We'll diagnose the flaw in traditional defense, dive into the protocol of silence, break down the security gap liability, unpack the radical transparency model, look at a real-world case study with the Cronus Mafia, and finish up with the executive risk mandate.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the flaw in traditional defense, where we diagnose institutional failure.
We really have to start with the origin of these frameworks, which are deeply rooted in Alberto Daniel Hill's own experience. Back in 2017, Hill ethically reported a massive medical data vulnerability in Uruguay. We are talking about default admin/admin credentials exposing 200,000 patient records. But instead of fixing the issue and thanking him, the state and the healthcare provider chose complete institutional opacity. They actually prosecuted him and wrongfully imprisoned him for 8 months. This crucible laid bare the severe systemic flaws in secretive defense models. It basically proved that institutions will frequently choose to criminalize the truth rather than just admit a flaw. That leads us perfectly into Section 2, the protocol of silence, and why it's a massive strategic gamble.
The absolute crucial point here is that this protocol isn't some accident. It's an intentional, highly dangerous choice. When a breach happens, corporations and governments routinely deploy what Hill calls narrative minimization. They just go mute, or they heavily downplay the severity, treating the whole situation purely as a PR crisis. Guys, this is a massive strategic gamble. You're essentially betting that hackers, criminals who have already broken the law to infiltrate your systems, are suddenly going to act honorably with your stolen data just because you're staying quiet. It literally prioritizes corporate reputation over actual citizen safety.
Now for Section 3, the security gap liability and its cascading risks.
Pay really close attention to this definition. The security gap is the time you buy for your PR team, but it's also the exact time you hand right over to the attackers. During this critical artificial gap, your enterprise's compromised credentials, biometric tokens, and digital signatures remain totally active. Why? Because you haven't publicly acknowledged the breach, which means you haven't revoked the compromised access. This leaves your clients, your users, and your citizens completely defenseless against identity theft and financial fraud. By remaining silent, you are actively facilitating the exploitation of your own clients.
Let's walk through how this escalation actually builds. Step 1, the breach occurs. Step 2, the executive board hits the panic button and activates the protocol of silence to manage the narrative. Step 3, this creates that massive window of liability. The attackers are inside using live credentials that you haven't disabled, because disabling them would mean admitting a problem exists. And finally, Step 4, the delayed public acknowledgement happens, but by then, the damage is completely done. This timeline directly multiplies our financial and legal liabilities step by step.
Moving on to Section 4, the radical transparency model. It is time for a totally new operational paradigm.
Notice the stark contrast here. On the left side, you've got traditional corporate security. It relies on sluggish, outdated non-disclosure agreements, closed-door meetings, and strict secrecy. But on the right, we have asymmetric dissidence. In simple terms, this means using unconventional, decentralized public tactics to fight organized cyber threats, and it's powered entirely by radical transparency. This model leverages an informed public, open communication, and real-time public accountability. It argues that a hyper-informed user base is a way more resilient corporate defense perimeter than a team of lawyers just trying to keep a secret.
And to back this all up, Hill developed the Global Secretism Index. This isn't just theory, folks. It's measurable data. It gives us a crystal-clear metric showing exactly why high-transparency jurisdictions vastly outperform high-opacity regimes. Think about it. In high-opacity environments, you get state retaliation against ethical hackers and a systemic lack of accountability. But over in high-transparency regimes, where you have mandatory immediate disclosure laws, you create a protected, thriving infrastructure that actually solves vulnerabilities faster. The data proves it. Transparency equals security.
This quote from Hill serves as the absolute philosophical anchor of our briefing today. I want you to really absorb this. Transparency is not a vulnerability. It is a prerequisite for digital sovereignty. It challenges us in this very boardroom to stop viewing public disclosure as some kind of weakness or a PR failure and start viewing it as the foundational requirement for securing our digital assets and maintaining true control.
So how does he actually execute this in the real world? By leveraging public forensic validation on decentralized platforms. Hill bridges the gap between old-school, siloed technical engineering and real-time, asymmetric public threat intelligence. Instead of waiting weeks for an internal IT audit to slowly wind its way through corporate channels, Hill uses live social audio rooms, independent podcasts like the Cyber Midnight Club, and public forensics to crowdsource and validate threat intelligence in minutes. He's completely bypassing the corporate red tape.
Which brings us to Section 5. Let's look at a case study of live threat intelligence in action with the Cronus Mafia.
Look at how incredibly fast this unfolded. While traditional state defense was acting sluggish, writing up closed-door memos, Hill was basically in the digital trenches listening to the attackers plan the heist. Applying radical transparency, step 1, he actively monitored a volatile 400-person dark web audio room called Bomitas del Bovierno. Step 2, he intercepted an explicit live threat from the advanced hacking syndicate Cronus Mafia, targeting Argentine state infrastructure. Step 3, he validated the claim publicly as a meta-analyst. And step 4, exactly as he predicted, the syndicate executed a massive data exfiltration on March 30th. He forecasted it perfectly by bypassing the protocol of silence and using live open-source intelligence.
And finally, Section 6, the executive risk mandate and how we start leading with truth.
If we are going to secure our digital sovereignty, your enterprise must adopt these key mandates immediately. First, we must completely discard the protocol of silence. Second, we have got to eliminate the security gap liability by instantly revoking compromised credentials. We must embrace mandatory incident disclosure, leverage live asymmetric threat intelligence rather than just waiting around for audit reports, and above all, we must prioritize our digital sovereignty over a short-term PR image. An informed, transparent ecosystem is, without a doubt, our strongest perimeter.
I'm going to leave you with this final, absolutely critical thought for your corporate risk management strategy. It's not a matter of if, but when the inevitable breach occurs. When your perimeter falls, which path are you going to choose? Are you going to rely on the outdated liability of silence, or are you going to ensure our corporate survival by leading with truth? That choice defines the future of our enterprise. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.